Tonight, step into a world where the air grows thin and the earth touches the sky, a place where survival itself becomes an art form. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Tonight, we're climbing, not with ropes or crampons, but with our minds, ascending into the realm of the high mountains, where life has learned to thrive in conditions that would quickly overwhelm most creatures. Here, where atmospheric pressure drops and oxygen becomes a precious commodity, where temperatures plunge and winds howl across barren slopes, an extraordinary community of animals has made its home. These are not merely survivors, they are masters. Each species we'll encounter tonight has spent millions of years perfecting the art of high-altitude existence, evolving remarkable adaptations that allow them to not just endure, but to flourish in one of Earth's most demanding environments. From the ghost-like snow leopard prowling rocky cliffs to the tiny pika gathering its winter stores, from massive yaks whose blood chemistry defies the thin air to geese that fly higher than Mount Everest itself, these animals have rewritten the rules of what's possible. The mountains we'll explore tonight span the globe. The Himalayas, rising like a spine across Asia, where peaks pierce through clouds into the realm of jet streams. The Andes, stretching along South America's western edge, home to condors that glide for hours without a single flap. The Rockies, the Alps, the mountains of Central Asia, each range hosting its own community of specialized inhabitants, each animal a testament to the power of adaptation. As we journey through these vertical worlds, we'll discover how life manipulates chemistry itself to extract oxygen from air so thin that human mountaineers must carry supplemental supplies. We'll learn how fur can become both armor against cold and camouflage against stone. We'll watch as hooves become precision instruments, capable of gripping surfaces that seem impossibly steep. And we'll understand why, in the mountains, every adaptation matters, why every detail of an animal's physiology can mean the difference between life and death. So, settle in. Let the sounds of the lowlands fade away. Tonight, we climb to where the air grows thin and the sky grows wide, to meet the remarkable creatures who call the roof of the world their home. To understand the animals that inhabit high mountains, we must first understand the environment that has shaped them. The high-altitude world is not simply a colder version of the valleys below. It is fundamentally different, governed by physical laws that create challenges unlike anything found at sea level. The most defining characteristic of high mountains is the atmosphere itself, or rather, the relative lack of it. As altitude increases, atmospheric pressure decreases in a relationship that's been mapped with precision by scientists. At sea level, the atmospheric pressure is approximately 101 kilopascals, a measure of the weight of the entire column of air pressing down from above. But climb to 3,000 meters, roughly 10,000 feet, and that pressure drops to about 70 kilopascals. At 5,000 meters, it's only half of what it was at sea level. And at the summit of Mount Everest, at 8,848 meters, the pressure is merely 1/3 of sea level values. This decrease in pressure has profound implications for the availability of oxygen. The percentage of oxygen in air remains constant at about 21%, regardless of altitude. But the partial pressure of oxygen, the actual amount of oxygen molecules available in each breath, decreases dramatically. At the summit of the tallest peaks, each lungful of air contains only about 1/3 the oxygen molecules that the same volume would contain at sea level. For animals whose cellular metabolism depends on a steady supply of oxygen to produce energy, this presents an enormous challenge. The human body's response to this oxygen scarcity is immediate and uncomfortable. Heart rate increases as the cardiovascular system attempts to deliver more blood to oxygen-starved tissues. Breathing becomes rapid and labored as the respiratory system tries to compensate for the thin air. Headaches, nausea, and fatigue set in as the body struggles to maintain normal function. Mountain climbers know these symptoms well, collectively calling them altitude sickness. At extreme elevations, above about 8,000 meters, humans enter what mountaineers call the death zone, an altitude so oxygen-poor that the human body actually begins to deteriorate, unable to acclimatize even with time. Yet animals live at these heights. They don't merely survive short visits like human mountaineers do. They thrive, reproduce, raise young, hunt, flee from predators, and carry out all the energetically demanding activities of life in air that would quickly incapacitate an unacclimatized human. Temperature adds another layer of difficulty to the high altitude equation. The atmosphere acts as a blanket, trapping heat near Earth's surface through the greenhouse effect. As one climbs higher, leaving more of that atmospheric blanket below, temperatures drop. The rate of this cooling, called the environmental lapse rate, averages about 6.5 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 meters of elevation gained. This means that a mountain rising from a warm valley at sea level will have a summit that's 30 to 40 degrees colder than its base, simply due to the physics of the atmosphere. In the highest mountain ranges, summit temperatures routinely plunge to 40 or 50 degrees below 0 Celsius, and that's before factoring in the wind. Mountain peaks extend into the realm of the jet streams, where winds can exceed 160 kilometers per hour. These winds create wind chill factors that can push effective temperatures even lower, stripping heat away from any exposed surface with relentless efficiency. The combination of extreme cold and ferocious wind creates an environment where maintaining body temperature becomes a constant battle, one that requires enormous amounts of energy. The terrain itself presents challenges that go beyond the physiological. Mountains are fundamentally unstable places, shaped by the violent forces of tectonic uplift and carved by the patient work of erosion. The slopes are steep, often approaching or exceeding 45 degrees. The ground is frequently broken, composed of loose scree, jumbled boulders, or sheer cliff faces. Ice and snow cover much of the high-altitude landscape for most or all of the year, creating surfaces that are simultaneously slippery and treacherous. Vegetation, which carpets the lowlands in abundance, becomes increasingly sparse as altitude increases. The growing season shortens to just a few months per year at high elevations, and the plants that do manage to survive tend to be small, tough specialists, grasses and small shrubs and cushion plants that hug the ground to escape the wind. Above a certain elevation, the tree line, trees can no longer survive at all, and the landscape transitions to alpine tundra, a realm of rock and hardy, low-growing plants. This scarcity of vegetation has profound implications for herbivores, who must range over large territories to find enough food, and for the carnivores that depend on those herbivores. Food is patchy and seasonal in the mountains, abundant during the brief summer growing season, but desperately scarce during the long winter months when snow buries what little vegetation exists. Solar radiation intensity increases with altitude as well, as there's less atmosphere to filter out harmful ultraviolet rays. Animals at high altitude face increased risk of sun damage to exposed skin and eyes, another challenge to add to the list. Water, paradoxically, can be both abundant and scarce in the mountains. While high peaks often harbour snow and ice year-round, and while rainfall can be heavy in some mountain regions, much of that water is locked up in solid form for much of the year. During winter, animals must either eat snow, which requires energy to melt, or find one of the rare springs or streams that remain liquid. In some high-altitude regions, particularly in the rain shadows of major mountain ranges, precipitation is scarce, creating high-altitude deserts where animals must be as water-efficient as any desert specialist. The mountain environment also varies dramatically over short distances. A south-facing slope might be relatively warm and sunny, while the north-facing slope of the same ridge remains cold and windswept. Valleys can be several degrees warmer than nearby peaks, creating microclimates that animals learn to exploit. The ability to move between these microclimates to find sheltered spots out of the wind, warm patches of sun, or sources of food and water becomes crucial for survival. Seasonal changes are extreme in the mountains. Summer brings a brief window of relative warmth and abundance. When snow melts, plants grow, insects emerge, and prey animals give birth to their young. But summer is fleeting at high altitude, often lasting only 3 or 4 months. Winter, by contrast, is long and brutal, a 6 or 8 month test of endurance when temperatures plunge, winds howl, and food becomes desperately scarce. This, then, is the environment that has shaped mountain wildlife. It is a place of extremes, where survival demands specialization, where every aspect of an animal's biology must be honed to the specific challenges of the high-altitude realm. The creatures we'll meet tonight have met these challenges with solutions both elegant and profound, rewriting the very chemistry of life to thrive where most creatures cannot. Of all the challenges that high-altitude animals face, the most fundamental is the scarcity of oxygen. Oxygen is not merely important to animal life. It is absolutely essential. Nearly all animals on Earth are aerobic organisms, meaning they use oxygen to break down food molecules and extract energy in a process called cellular respiration. Without adequate oxygen, this process falters, energy production drops, and cells begin to fail. At sea level, this is never a concern. The air is rich in oxygen, and animals extract what they need with each breath. But in the thin air of high mountains, every breath contains far fewer oxygen molecules. And yet, the energy demands of life remain the same or even increase, as animals must work harder to maintain body temperature and move through difficult terrain. The solution for most high-altitude animals begins with the blood. Blood is the body's oxygen delivery system, and at the heart of that system is a molecule called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein found inside red blood cells, and its job is to bind oxygen in the lungs and carry it to tissues throughout the body. The efficiency of this process depends on hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, its tendency to grab oxygen molecules when they're available and hold on to them until they're needed. In animals adapted to high altitude, hemoglobin has been fine-tuned through evolution to have a higher oxygen affinity than that of their lowland relatives. This means that even when oxygen is scarce, their hemoglobin is better at capturing what little is available. The bar-headed goose, which migrates over the Himalayas at altitudes exceeding 7,000 meters, provides a striking example. These geese have hemoglobin with a significantly higher oxygen affinity than other waterfowl, the result of specific amino acid changes in the hemoglobin molecule itself. This allows their blood to load oxygen efficiently, even in the thin air of high-altitude flight. Similarly, the yak, the iconic bovine of the Tibetan Plateau, has hemoglobin that binds oxygen more tightly than that of domestic cattle. When researchers compared yaks living at 5,000 meters to cattle adapted to low altitudes, they found that the yak's blood maintained higher oxygen saturation levels despite the severely reduced atmospheric pressure. The molecular basis for this lies in the structure of the hemoglobin protein, where specific genetic mutations have altered how the molecule responds to oxygen. But having hemoglobin with high oxygen affinity is only part of the solution. Animals also need enough hemoglobin in their blood to carry sufficient oxygen. This is where another adaptation comes into play: increased red blood cell count. Red blood cells are the vehicles that carry hemoglobin through the bloodstream, and high-altitude animals typically have more of them per unit of blood than their lowland counterparts. Studies of yaks at different altitudes on the Tibetan Plateau reveal this pattern clearly. Yaks living at 5,100 meters have red blood cell counts averaging 9.34 times 10 to the 12th per liter of blood, significantly higher than yaks living at lower elevations. More red blood cells means more hemoglobin, which means more oxygen carrying capacity, which means better oxygen delivery to hungry tissues. This adaptation comes with trade-offs, however. Blood with more red blood cells is thicker, more viscous, which makes it harder for the heart to pump. Too many red blood cells can actually be dangerous, leading to a condition called chronic mountain sickness in humans, where the blood becomes so thick that it increases the risk of blood clots and strokes. High-altitude animals must strike a careful balance, having enough red blood cells to carry sufficient oxygen, but not so many that the blood becomes dangerously thick. Interestingly, not all high-altitude natives take the route of increasing red blood cell count. Humans who have lived at high altitude for thousands of years show different adaptations depending on their ancestral origins. Tibetan highlanders, for instance, maintain relatively normal red blood cell counts despite living above 4,000 meters. Instead, their adaptation appears to involve increased blood flow and changes in how efficiently oxygen is delivered from blood to tissues at the cellular level. This suggests that there are multiple evolutionary paths to solving the oxygen delivery problem, each with its own set of advantages and constraints. The lungs themselves, the organs where oxygen first enters the body, show remarkable adaptations in high-altitude species. Larger lungs mean more surface area for gas exchange, more opportunity for oxygen to diffuse from the air into the blood. The yak has lungs that are proportionally larger than those of domestic cattle, giving it more respiratory capacity. The bar-headed goose similarly has larger lungs relative to its body size than other waterfowl, providing extra room for the air exchange needed during high-altitude flight. But size isn't everything. The efficiency of gas exchange matters as much as the volume of the lungs. Birds have a respiratory system that's fundamentally more efficient than that of mammals. One of the reasons they're generally more tolerant of hypoxia. Birds have air sacs in addition to lungs, and these create a unidirectional flow of air through the respiratory system, meaning that fresh air is constantly flowing across the gas exchange surfaces in the lungs. Mammals, by contrast, breathe in and out through the same airways, so the air in the deepest parts of the lungs is never completely replaced with fresh air. This bird respiratory advantage helps explain how bar-headed geese can sustain flapping flight at altitudes that would incapacitate most mammals. Their respiratory system is simply more effective at extracting oxygen from each breath, even when oxygen is desperately scarce. The heart, too, must adapt to the demands of high-altitude life. Pumping oxygen-rich blood through the body is the heart's primary job, and at high altitude, that job becomes more difficult. The heart must work harder to deliver the same amount of oxygen, beating faster and pumping with more force. High-altitude animals often have proportionally larger hearts than their lowland relatives. Hearts with more powerful contractions, capable of maintaining adequate blood flow even when oxygen is limited. Cardiac output, the volume of blood the heart pumps per minute, can increase dramatically in response to hypoxia. Studies of bar-headed geese flying in low oxygen conditions show that they can increase their cardiac output to 5 times their resting rate, a remarkable feat that requires both a strong heart and blood vessels capable of handling the increased flow. At the cellular level, mitochondria, the tiny organelles responsible for producing energy from oxygen and nutrients, also show adaptations in high-altitude animals. Mitochondria are often more numerous in the muscle tissue of high-altitude species, and they may also be more efficient, producing more energy from the limited oxygen that's available. Research on yaks has found that their muscle tissue contains enzymes involved in energy production at higher concentrations than cattle, allowing them to maintain cellular energy levels even when oxygen is scarce. Some high-altitude animals also show enhanced anaerobic metabolism, the ability to produce energy without oxygen. Anaerobic metabolism is much less efficient than aerobic metabolism, producing only about 5% as much energy from the same amount of fuel, but it can provide a temporary boost when oxygen availability is critically low. The buildup of lactate, a byproduct of anaerobic metabolism, can be tolerated at higher levels in some high-altitude species, allowing them to push through brief periods of extreme exertion even when oxygen is almost unavailable. Breathing itself changes at high altitude. The respiratory centers in the brain, which control the rate and depth of breathing, become more sensitive to blood oxygen levels in high-altitude animals. This means they breathe more frequently, taking more breaths per minute than they would at sea level, which helps compensate for the reduced oxygen content of each breath. The bar-headed goose can hyperventilate at rates up to 7 times their resting level when exposed to severe hypoxia, a response that helps maintain oxygen uptake even in incredibly thin air. But hyperventilation creates its own problems. Breathing out carbon dioxide is part of the respiratory process, and excessive breathing can remove too much carbon dioxide from the blood, causing the blood pH to shift and potentially interfering with normal cellular function. High-altitude animals must balance the need for increased oxygen intake against the risk of disturbing their blood chemistry. The blood's buffering capacity, its ability to resist changes in pH, is another adaptation seen in high-altitude species. Enhanced buffering systems allow these animals to hyperventilate without causing dangerous pH swings, maintaining the delicate chemical balance that cellular function requires. Even the blood vessels themselves show adaptations. In many lowland mammals, exposure to hypoxia causes pulmonary vasoconstriction, a narrowing of blood vessels in the lungs that actually makes oxygen delivery more difficult. This response can lead to pulmonary hypertension and, in extreme cases, to life-threatening conditions like high-altitude pulmonary edema. High-altitude animals typically show reduced or absent pulmonary vasoconstriction, allowing blood to flow freely through the lungs, even when oxygen is scarce. The yak, remarkably, shows almost no pulmonary vasoconstriction in response to hypoxia, a stark contrast to cattle, which experience severe pulmonary hypertension when brought to high altitudes. This difference allows yaks to maintain normal lung function and avoid the dangerous fluid accumulation in the lungs that plagues altitude-sick cattle. All of these adaptations, the enhanced hemoglobin, the increased red blood cells, the larger lungs, the stronger hearts, the more efficient mitochondria, the modified breathing patterns, work together as an integrated system. Each component supports the others, creating a physiological machine capable of extracting, transporting, and utilizing oxygen with remarkable efficiency, even when oxygen is devastatingly scarce. These are not changes that happen overnight. They are the products of evolutionary time, of countless generations living and dying in the thin air of the mountains, of natural selection favoring those individuals whose particular combinations of genes allowed them to thrive where others struggled. The animals alive in the mountains today are the descendants of those rare individuals who possess the right genetic variants, the ones whose hemoglobin bound oxygen a bit more tightly, whose hearts beat a bit more strongly, whose bodies found ways to function when oxygen was a precious commodity. And yet, for all the sophistication of these adaptations, they are not unlimited. Even the most altitude-adapted animals have their limits, elevations beyond which survival becomes impossible. These limits are being tested now as climate change alters mountain environments, pushing species toward higher elevations in search of cooler temperatures, but confronting them with ever thinner air. Understanding how these animals manage oxygen scarcity is not just an exercise in biological curiosity. It's essential knowledge for predicting how mountain ecosystems will respond to a changing world. If oxygen scarcity is the most fundamental challenge of high-altitude life, cold is surely the most immediate. Temperature drops relentlessly with altitude, and in the highest mountains, animals face conditions that would quickly kill an unprotected, warm-blooded creature. Yet endothermic animals, birds and mammals that maintain constant body temperatures through metabolic heat production not only survive but remain active through months of sub-zero cold. Their solutions to the cold problem are as varied as they are impressive. The first line of defense is insulation, and in the mountains, insulation comes primarily in the form of fur or feathers. Fur is a remarkable material, a composite structure consisting of individual hairs that create dead air spaces, and it's these air spaces that provide the insulation. Air is a poor conductor of heat, so trapped air becomes a barrier that reduces heat loss from the animal's body to the cold environment. But not all fur is created equal. The density, length, and structure of fur vary enormously among species, and high-altitude animals have evolved some of the most sophisticated pelage on Earth. The snow leopard, that phantom of the high peaks, has fur that can be up to 5 inches thick on some parts of its body. This incredible thickness is achieved through a combination of dense underfur, fine hairs packed tightly together, and longer guard hairs that provide the outer layer. The underfur traps air close to the skin, creating an insulating layer, while the guard hairs protect the underfur from wind and moisture. The snow leopard's tail deserves special mention. Exceptionally long and thick, it serves multiple purposes: as a balance aid during climbs, as a scarf that the leopard can wrap around its face during sleep for additional warmth, and as a store of fat for lean times. The tail alone can be nearly a meter long, almost as long as the leopard's body, and it's covered in the same luxurious, thick fur that coats the rest of the animal. Yaks have taken fur insulation to extreme lengths. Their coats consist of 3 layers: a dense woolly undercoat that provides core insulation, a middle layer of slightly coarser hair, and an outer layer of long, coarse guard hairs that can hang down nearly to the ground, creating what appears to be a skirt around the animal. This 3-layer system is so effective that yaks can comfortably survive temperatures of -40 degrees Celsius, temperatures that would be life-threatening to most cattle within hours. The guard hairs of high-altitude animals often have special properties. They may be hollow, filled with air rather than solid protein, which enhances their insulating properties while keeping them lightweight. They may be slightly oily, which helps shed water and prevents the fur from becoming matted and losing its insulating ability when wet. They may be structured to allow moisture from the animal's body to escape while preventing cold air from penetrating inward. Color is another consideration. The snow leopard's pale grey coat, covered with dark rosettes and spots, provides camouflage against the rocky, snow-patched terrain of its habitat. But lighter colors also have thermal properties. They absorb less solar radiation than dark colors, which might seem counterproductive in a cold environment. However, at high altitude, solar radiation can be intense even when air temperature is frigid, and animals can actually overheat in direct sun if they're too dark. The pale coloration of many high-altitude animals may help them avoid overheating during periods of sun exposure, while still maintaining warmth through the insulating properties of their fur. Seasonal changes in fur are crucial for many mountain animals. Marmots, those stout rodents of high meadows, grow thick winter coats that they shed in spring, a process called molting. The timing of this molt is critical. Shed the winter coat too early, and a late spring storm could be deadly. Keep it too long into summer, and the animal might overheat during periods of activity. The molt is triggered by photoperiod, the changing length of days, which provides a reliable cue that the seasons are shifting. Some mountain animals even change color with their seasonal coat changes. This isn't primarily for thermal regulation, but for camouflage. Arctic hares, which inhabit some high-altitude regions, turn white in winter to blend with snow, then molt to brown in summer to match the exposed tundra. This seasonal camouflage is essential protection from predators, but it comes with timing challenges. Climate change is causing spring to arrive earlier in many regions, and snow is melting sooner, sometimes before animals have completed their molt to summer colors. White hairs on brown backgrounds become easy targets for predators, but fur alone isn't enough. High-altitude animals also employ fat as insulation. Fat is stored beneath the skin in a layer called subcutaneous fat, and this layer serves multiple purposes. Like fur, it insulates, reducing heat loss from the body's core. But unlike fur, fat is also a stored energy source, a reservoir that can be drawn upon when food is scarce. Marmots are champions of fat accumulation. During the brief summer months, they feed voraciously on grasses and herbs, gaining weight rapidly. By autumn, an individual marmot might carry fat reserves amounting to 20% of its total body weight. This fat will sustain the animal through the long winter hibernation, a period that can last up to 9 months in some species. The marmot's body slowly consumes this fat, breaking it down to produce just enough energy to keep basic cellular functions going at a drastically reduced metabolic rate. Body shape also matters for cold resistance. Allen's rule, a biological principle, states that endothermic animals from cold climates tend to have shorter appendages, smaller ears, shorter legs, and more compact bodies than their relatives from warmer climates. The reason is simple geometry. Heat is lost from the body surface, and a compact, rounded shape has less surface area relative to its volume than an elongated shape. Less surface area means less heat loss. High-altitude animals tend to follow Allen's rule closely. Pikas, small rodents that live in rocky slopes at high elevation, have round bodies, short legs, and tiny, barely visible ears. This compact form reduces heat loss compared to a more elongated body plan. The ears, in particular, are vulnerable to heat loss because they're thin structures filled with blood vessels. Small ears lose less heat, which is why many high-altitude animals have ears that are proportionally smaller than those of their lowland relatives. The ibex and mountain goats, while they have relatively long legs needed for climbing, still tend toward stocky, compact bodies. Their musculature is dense and powerful, and muscle tissue itself generates heat through its metabolic activity. Simply being muscular helps these animals stay warm. Metabolic rate, the speed at which an animal burns calories to produce energy and heat, is another adjustable variable. High-altitude animals often have elevated resting metabolic rates compared to lowland species, meaning they generate more internal heat even when at rest. This comes at a cost, however. Higher metabolism requires more food, and food is often scarce in the mountains. It's a delicate balance between producing enough heat to survive and not starving due to excessive energy demands. Some animals, particularly small ones like pikas and marmots, modify their behavior to conserve heat. They spend time sunning themselves on rocks when the weather permits, absorbing solar radiation to warm their bodies passively. They seek shelter in burrows or among rocks during the coldest parts of the day or during storms. Marmots create elaborate burrow systems that extend deep underground, where temperatures remain relatively stable, buffered from the extreme surface conditions. Huddling is another behavioral adaptation. Marmots are social animals, living in family groups, and they huddle together for warmth, particularly during hibernation. Multiple animals curled up together lose heat much more slowly than a single individual would alone, because the ratio of surface area to volume is more favorable for a cluster of animals than for individuals. The extremities, the feet and tail in particular, present special challenges. These thin appendages can lose heat rapidly, and in extreme cold, they risk frostbite. Some animals employ countercurrent heat exchange in their limbs, a sophisticated physiological mechanism where arteries carrying warm blood from the heart run alongside veins carrying cool blood back from the extremities. Heat transfers from the warm arterial blood to the cool venous blood, pre-warming the returning blood and pre-cooling the outgoing blood. This reduces heat loss from the limbs while ensuring that the core stays warm. Snow leopards have proportionally large furry paws that act like snowshoes, distributing their weight over a larger area and preventing them from sinking into deep snow. But those paws are also insulated, with fur covering even the undersides, protecting against the cold ground. The furry paws serve multiple functions simultaneously: traction, weight distribution, and insulation. The nasal passages of high-altitude animals are often enlarged or specially structured. When an animal breathes in cold air, that air must be warmed before it reaches the lungs, or it can cause damage to the delicate lung tissue. The nasal passages serve as a heat exchanger, warming incoming air using heat from the body. Yaks and snow leopards both have enlarged nasal cavities that increase the surface area available for this warming process, allowing them to breathe very cold air safely. Feathers provide insulation for mountain birds through mechanisms similar to fur. The structure of feathers, with their central shaft and branching barbs, creates air pockets that trap heat. Birds fluff their feathers to increase the thickness of this insulating layer, puffing themselves up to create maximum airspace. During extreme cold, birds may also tuck their heads under their wings, reducing exposed surface area, or stand on one leg while tucking the other into their body feathers. Some high-altitude birds also have feathered legs and feet. The ptarmigan, a grouse species that lives in alpine regions, has feathers extending all the way down its legs to its toes, providing insulation where other birds have bare scales. These feathered legs help the bird maintain body temperature even when standing on snow. Torpor, a state of decreased metabolic activity and lowered body temperature, is used by some smaller mountain animals as an energy-saving strategy during cold periods. Unlike hibernation, which can last months, torpor is typically a daily cycle. An animal might allow its body temperature to drop overnight, reducing its energy expenditure, then warm back up in the morning. Hummingbirds, which live at high altitudes in some mountain ranges, regularly use torpor to survive cold nights when they can't feed. The combination of all these adaptations, the thick fur or dense feathers, the subcutaneous fat, the compact body shapes, the elevated metabolic rates, the behavioral strategies, the specialized blood flow patterns, creates a multi-layered defense against cold. Each layer contributes to the whole, and together they allow warm-blooded animals to maintain their body temperatures in environments where the ambient temperature may be 30, 40, or even 50 degrees below the point at which their tissues would freeze. Yet even with all these adaptations, there are limits. Extreme cold, combined with high wind and insufficient food, can overwhelm even the most cold-adapted animal. Winter mortality is significant for mountain wildlife, and young animals who haven't yet developed their full adult insulation and haven't built up substantial fat reserves are particularly vulnerable. The harsh mountain winter is a relentless test, one that not all individuals pass. In the mountains, the ground is not flat. It rises in steep slopes, breaks into sheer cliffs, tumbles into boulder fields and scree. To move through this terrain requires specialized anatomy and extraordinary skill. Several mountain animals have become masters of vertical terrain, capable of scaling surfaces that seem impossible, moving with confidence across faces where a single misstep means death. The ibex, a wild goat found in various mountain ranges across Europe, Asia, and Africa, is perhaps the most famous of these climbing specialists. With backward curving horns that can exceed a meter in length and a stocky, muscular build, the ibex cuts an impressive figure. But it's the hooves that tell the real story of adaptation. An ibex's hooves are cloven, split into 2 toes, and this split allows the hooves to spread apart, increasing the surface area in contact with the rock. Each toe has a hard, sharp outer edge and a softer, rubbery inner pad. The hard edge can grip tiny irregularities in the rock face, finding purchase where none seems to exist, while the soft pad provides friction, essentially creating a non-slip surface. This combination of hard and soft, rigid and flexible, allows the ibex to walk on surfaces that appear impossibly steep. The concave shape of the hoof's underside is crucial. This concavity acts like a suction cup, increasing grip on smooth surfaces, and allows the hoof to conform slightly to the shape of the rock, maximizing the area of contact. When an ibex places its hoof on a rock, it's not simply resting its weight on a surface. It's actively engaging with that surface through multiple mechanical means simultaneously. But hooves are just part of the climbing equation. The ibex's legs are powerfully muscled, capable of generating the force needed to propel the animal upward from precarious footholds. The legs are also positioned to give the ibex a low center of gravity, making it more stable on slopes. When an ibex climbs, its movement is deliberate and calculated. It tests each foothold before committing its weight, shifting its balance carefully to maintain 3 points of contact whenever possible. The ibex's skeleton is also adapted for climbing. The bones are strong but not unduly heavy, providing a framework that can withstand the stresses of climbing without burdening the animal with excess weight. The spine is flexible, allowing the ibex to contort its body to navigate tight spaces or maintain balance on narrow ledges. Perhaps most remarkable is where ibexes choose to climb. In the Italian Alps, ibexes have been observed scaling the nearly vertical concrete faces of dams. These structures, built by humans, are steeper than any natural rock face, with slopes that can exceed 150%. Yet ibexes climb them willingly, even bringing their kids along, to reach mineral deposits leached from the concrete. Salt and other minerals are scarce in the high mountains, and the ibexes have learned that dam walls, while treacherous, provide access to these essential nutrients. Watching an ibex climb a dam is to witness the limits of what mammalian anatomy can achieve. The animal moves slowly, placing each hoof with precision, its hooves barely finding purchase on tiny protrusions in the concrete surface. Sometimes the ibex pauses, motionless, perched impossibly on a near vertical wall, as if considering its next move. Then it continues, defying gravity through a combination of specialized anatomy, learned behavior, and what can only be called courage, or perhaps simply necessity. Mountain goats, found in the mountain ranges of North America, are equally impressive climbers. Though not true goats, they're related to ibexes and share many similar adaptations. Their hooves are similarly structured, with hard outer rims and rubbery inner pads. Mountain goats live above the tree line in some of the most rugged terrain in the Rockies and other western ranges, and they navigate cliffs and steep snowfields with apparent ease. One adaptation particularly notable in mountain goats is their shoulder structure. The highest point on a mountain goat is actually its shoulders, which are heavily muscled and provide the power for climbing. This shoulder muscle mass allows the goat to pull itself upward from the front legs, using its forelegs almost like arms in some climbing situations. Combined with powerful hind legs that can push from below, the mountain goat can ascend slopes that would stop most other mammals. The Himalayan tahr, another wild goat species, shows similar climbing adaptations, but has also evolved a coat of thick reddish-brown fur that extends down its legs, creating what looks almost like woolly pants. This fur protects against cold and wind, while the tahr navigates the steep slopes of the Himalayas. Tahrs are famous for their ability to stand on ledges barely wider than their hooves, appearing to balance impossibly, while they graze on whatever sparse vegetation they can find. Balance is as important as grip for mountain climbers. The inner ear, which houses the vestibular system responsible for balance and spatial orientation, is highly developed in mountain ungulates. This system tells the animal where it is in space, which way is up, and how its body is tilted, allowing for constant micro-adjustments in posture that maintain balance on uneven, tilted, or narrow surfaces. Behavior also plays a crucial role. Mountain climbing animals learn their terrain intimately. They know which routes are safe, which ledges are stable, where water can be found, where predators are likely to appear. This knowledge is partly instinctive, but also learned, passed from mothers to offspring through example. Young ibexes and mountain goats stay with their mothers for months, watching and imitating, learning the art of climbing through practice and observation. The kids of these species are born with remarkable abilities. Within hours of birth, a young ibex can follow its mother across steep terrain. The newborns are not as skilled as adults. They slip more often, they move more cautiously, but their basic climbing abilities are innate. Natural selection has favored individuals born with the neural and muscular coordination needed for climbing, because those that lack these abilities don't survive. Yet even expert climbers make mistakes. Falls do happen, and they're often fatal. Researchers studying mountain goats have documented mortality from falls, particularly among juveniles, and during harsh weather, when rocks become icy. But the statistical risk of falling, while present, is evidently acceptable when weighed against the benefits of accessing terrain that predators cannot follow, and food sources that other herbivores cannot reach. Some mountain animals have taken to climbing, not rocks, but other vertical structures. In parts of Morocco, goats have learned to climb argan trees, balancing on branches to reach the fruit. While not as extreme as cliff climbing, this tree climbing behavior demonstrates the adaptability and learning capacity of mountain ungulates. If a food source exists in a difficult-to-reach location, these animals will often find a way to access it. The snow leopard, though primarily a predator, is also an accomplished climber. It must be, to catch prey that lives on cliffs and steep slopes. The snow leopard's long tail, mentioned earlier for its insulating properties, also serves as a counterbalance during climbs and leaps. The tail's weight can be shifted to help the leopard maintain balance as it navigates narrow ledges or lands from a jump. The leopard's large paws, besides serving as snowshoes, also provide excellent grip on rock. The paws have strong, retractable claws that can dig into surfaces, and the pads on the bottom of the paws provide friction. Combined with its powerful leg muscles and flexible spine, the snow leopard can make leaps of 15 meters or more across gaps between rock faces, and it can traverse terrain that would challenge even ibexes. Birds of prey that hunt in mountains, such as golden eagles, must also be skilled at navigating three-dimensional terrain. These birds use the mountain's topography to their advantage, soaring along ridges where updrafts provide lift, diving from cliff tops to strike at prey below. Their maneuvering abilities, their ability to adjust their speed and direction instantly, are crucial for hunting successfully in terrain full of obstacles. The physical act of climbing is energetically expensive. It requires more effort to move upward against gravity than to move horizontally across flat ground. Mountain animals must balance the energy cost of climbing against the benefits of reaching particular locations. Ibexes might climb to a specific patch of vegetation that's more nutritious than lowland forage, or to a mineral lick, or to a sleeping ledge that's safe from predators. The calculation of whether the climb is worth the effort is one these animals make constantly, guided by instinct and experience. Seasonal changes affect climbing conditions dramatically. In summer, rocks are dry and provide good grip. In winter, ice and snow cover many surfaces, making climbing more treacherous. Mountain animals adjust their behavior seasonally, choosing different routes, moving to different areas, or restricting their movements to safer terrain during the most difficult periods. The climbing abilities of mountain wildlife represent some of the most specialized locomotor adaptations in the animal kingdom. These are not generalists who can climb adequately. They are extreme specialists, their entire anatomy and behavior shaped by millions of years of selection pressure, favoring those individuals slightly better at navigating vertical terrain. The result is a suite of species that seem to defy gravity, that make the impossible look routine, and that access resources unavailable to any animal less spectacularly adapted to the vertical world of the mountains. Among all the animals of the high mountains, perhaps none captures human imagination quite like the snow leopard. Rarely seen, solitary, and achingly beautiful, this big cat prowls the rocky slopes of Central Asia's highest ranges, hunting in some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth. The snow leopard is not just adapted to the mountains, it is inseparable from them, a creature so specialized for high-altitude life that it cannot survive elsewhere. The snow leopard's scientific name is Panthera uncia, placing it among the great cats alongside tigers, lions, and jaguars. It inhabits the mountain ranges of 12 countries, including Afghanistan, Bhutan, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Its range spans the Himalayas, the Karakoram, the Hindu Kush, the Tian Shan, the Pamir Mountains, and other Central Asian ranges. This is a realm of rock and ice, of thin air and bitter cold, of steep slopes and scarce prey. The typical elevation range for snow leopards is between 3,000 and 4,500 meters above sea level, though they can be found as high as 5,500 meters in some areas. This is far above the tree line, in the zone of alpine meadows and bare rock. In winter, snow leopards may descend to lower elevations, following their prey, but they never venture into the lowlands. The mountains are their home, their fortress, their entire world. A snow leopard is a relatively small big cat. Males typically weigh between 45 and 55 kilograms, with females somewhat lighter, usually between 35 and 40 kilograms. The body is long and flexible, measuring about 1 meter to 1 meter 30 from nose to base of tail. And the tail itself is extraordinarily long, between 80 and 100 centimeters, sometimes approaching the length of the body itself. The coat is thick and luxurious, pale grey to cream in base colour, covered with dark grey to black rosettes and spots. The rosettes are larger on the back and sides, becoming smaller solid spots on the head and limbs. This pattern provides remarkable camouflage against the rocky, partially snow-covered terrain where snow leopards hunt. When a snow leopard freezes, motionless on a boulder or ledge, it becomes nearly invisible, blending so perfectly with its surroundings that even experienced observers can pass within meters without seeing it. This invisibility has earned the species its nickname, the ghost of the mountains. The face is distinctive, with pale eyes, green or grey, unusual among big cats. Most big cats have amber or yellow eyes. The ears are small and rounded, reducing heat loss and giving the head a somewhat compact appearance. The face is broad with a shortened muzzle, and inside that muzzle are powerful jaws, equipped with large canine teeth for gripping prey and specialized carnassial teeth for slicing meat. The nasal passages, as mentioned earlier, are enlarged, with an expanded nasal cavity that warms cold air before it reaches the lungs. This adaptation is crucial in the snow leopard's range, where temperatures can reach -40 degrees Celsius. Breathing such cold air without warming it first would damage the lungs, but the snow leopard's specially structured nose protects against this. The paws are large and circular, acting as natural snowshoes. The undersides are covered with fur, providing insulation from the cold ground and improving traction on snow and ice. The fur between the toes and pads increases the surface area of the paw, distributing weight more broadly and allowing the snow leopard to walk on top of snow that would be impassable for a smaller-footed predator. The legs are powerful, heavily muscled for leaping and climbing. Snow leopards are capable of jumps exceeding 15 meters, launching themselves from one outcrop to another across seemingly impossible gaps. They can also leap vertically up to 6 meters, allowing them to reach ledges and pursue prey that takes refuge on cliffs. The long tail serves multiple functions, all crucial to survival. As a balance aid, it acts like a tightrope walker's pole, shifting weight to help the leopard maintain equilibrium on narrow ledges and during spectacular leaps. The tail is also a fat storage organ. During the brief summer, when prey is relatively abundant, the snow leopard stores fat along the length of its tail, creating a reserve that can be metabolized during lean winter months. And perhaps, most remarkably, the tail serves as insulation. When a snow leopard rests or sleeps, it curls into a tight ball and wraps its tail around its body, covering its face with the bushy, furry length. The tail acts like a blanket, conserving heat and protecting the leopard's face and respiratory passages from bitter cold and wind. Snow leopards are obligate carnivores, meaning they eat only meat. Their primary prey varies across their range, but typically includes wild sheep and goats, such as blue sheep, Himalayan tahr, and ibex. These prey species are themselves mountain specialists, living in terrain that's difficult to access and navigate. This means snow leopards must be not just capable climbers, but extraordinary ones, able to match the agility of prey animals that have evolved specifically to escape predation by fleeing to impossible places. A single snow leopard requires a large hunting territory, typically between 30 and 65 square kilometers in areas with good prey populations, but up to 500 square kilometers or more where prey is sparse. These territories overlap, particularly between males and females, though snow leopards generally avoid each other except during breeding season. They are solitary animals, each individual hunting alone and covering vast distances in search of food. The hunting strategy is stalking and ambush. Snow leopards use the terrain to their advantage, approaching from above whenever possible, using rocks and slight depressions for cover as they creep closer to their prey. When within range, usually around 20 to 30 meters, the snow leopard charges, covering ground with explosive speed, and attempts to bring down the prey animal with a leap. The attack aims for the neck or throat, where a bite from those powerful jaws can crush vertebrae or throttle the prey by cutting off airflow. Not every hunt succeeds. Prey animals are alert and fast, and they have the home advantage, knowing the local terrain better than any transient predator. Snow leopards succeed in perhaps 1 out of every 4 or 5 attempts, and sometimes less. A missed kill means the snow leopard has expended considerable energy for no gain. And in the thin air of high altitude, where every breath requires more effort, energy is precious. When a snow leopard does make a kill, it feeds for several days, returning to the carcass repeatedly until nothing edible remains. A typical ungulate kill provides enough meat to sustain a snow leopard for about a week. If not disturbed, the leopard may drag the carcass to a more sheltered location and cache it, covering it with snow or rocks to protect it from scavengers. In the high mountains, scavengers include ravens, vultures, and occasionally other predators like wolves or bears, though these competitors are less common at the highest elevations where snow leopards typically hunt. Communication among snow leopards happens primarily through scent marking. The leopards have scent glands on their cheeks, and they rub these against rocks and boulders along their regular travel routes, leaving chemical signatures that other snow leopards can detect. They also spray urine on rocks and scrape the ground with their hind legs, behaviors that deposit scent and create visual markers. These markings serve to advertise an individual's presence and reproductive status, allowing snow leopards to communicate without actually meeting, which could lead to dangerous confrontations. Vocalizations are used, but are relatively uncommon. Snow leopards can produce a range of sounds, including hisses, growls, moans, and yowls. They also make a non-aggressive puffing sound called chuffing, a breathy vocalization used in friendly contexts, such as when a mother greets her cubs. Notably, snow leopards cannot roar, unlike some of their panthera relatives. The inability to roar is due to differences in the structure of the hyoid bone in the throat, which in roaring cats is partially cartilaginous and flexible, but in snow leopards is fully ossified and rigid. Breeding typically occurs in late winter, between January and March. After a gestation period of about 90 to 100 days, the female gives birth to a litter of typically 2 to 3 cubs, though litters can range from 1 to 5. The cubs are born in a den, usually a rocky cave or crevice, that provides shelter from the weather and concealment from potential threats. The cubs are born blind and helpless, each weighing around 400 to 500 grams. Their eyes open at about 7 days, and they begin eating solid meat at around 2 months, though they continue nursing until they're 5 or 6 months old. The mother hunts alone, leaving the cubs in the den while she searches for prey. Then, returning to nurse, and later to bring back meat for the growing cubs. As the cubs grow, they begin to accompany their mother on hunting trips, learning by observation. This education period is lengthy, lasting 18 to 22 months, during which the cubs learn not just how to hunt, but how to navigate the mountain terrain, where to find water, how to avoid danger, and all the other skills necessary for independent survival. Eventually, the cubs disperse, each setting out to establish its own territory, and the mother is free to breed again. The lifespan of a snow leopard in the wild is typically 10 to 12 years, though they can live longer in protected areas where threats are fewer. In captivity, with regular food, veterinary care, and no predators, snow leopards have lived beyond 20 years. But wildlife is hard, and many individuals don't reach old age. Snow leopards face numerous threats. Habitat loss is one, as human development encroaches into mountain areas, building roads, mines, and settlements that fragment the leopard's range. Prey reduction is another, as livestock grazing competes with wild ungulates for forage, reducing prey populations. This sometimes forces snow leopards to hunt livestock, which brings them into conflict with herders who may kill leopards in retaliation. Poaching remains a serious threat. Snow leopard fur is highly valued, and bones and other body parts are used in traditional medicine in some cultures, despite the lack of scientific evidence for their efficacy. Though international trade in snow leopards is banned under CITES, illegal killing and trafficking continue, driven by demand and poverty in some of the remote communities that share the snow leopard's range. Climate change presents an emerging threat. As temperatures rise, the tree line is moving upward on many mountains, and vegetation patterns are shifting. Prey animals may move to higher elevations, and snow leopards must follow. But there's only so much elevation available, and already snow leopards live near the upper limits of where large mammals can survive. The space for adaptation is limited. Conservation efforts are ongoing in all 12 range countries, involving governments, NGOs, and local communities. Protected areas have been established, though enforcement can be challenging in remote mountain regions. Community-based conservation programs work to reduce human-wildlife conflict, providing compensation for livestock losses and supporting local livelihoods in ways that don't depend on harming snow leopards. Anti-poaching patrols, education programs, and scientific research all contribute to understanding and protecting this species. The global population of snow leopards is estimated at between 4,000 and 6,500 individuals, though this number is uncertain because counting animals that are solitary, wide-ranging, and cryptic is extremely difficult. The species is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List, meaning it faces a high risk of extinction in the wild. Every individual matters. To see a snow leopard in the wild is considered one of wildlife watching's greatest privileges, an encounter so rare and special that people travel for weeks through difficult terrain for even a chance of a sighting. Most people who live and work in snow leopard habitat have never seen one, despite sharing the mountains with these cats for their entire lives. The snow leopard remains a ghost, present but unseen, a symbol of the wild, remote places that still exist on our crowded planet, a reminder that some parts of Earth belong to creatures other than humans, that some places are still wild, still dangerous, still gloriously, heartbreakingly free. While the snow leopard captures attention with its size and charisma, some of the mountain's most remarkable adaptations are found in much smaller creatures. The pikas and marmots, rodents that inhabit rocky slopes and alpine meadows across mountain ranges in North America, Europe, and Asia, have evolved strategies for survival that are no less impressive than those of the large, iconic species, just different in scale and approach. Pikas are small lagomorphs, relatives of rabbits and hares, weighing only about 150 grams as adults. The American pika, found in the mountain ranges of western North America, is perhaps the most studied species. But there are 30 species of pikas worldwide, most living at high altitudes. These are cute animals by almost any standard, round and fluffy with short legs, tiny ears, and no visible tail. They look more like stuffed toys than like real animals, but appearances are deceiving. Pikas are tough, resourceful, and remarkably well adapted to conditions that would quickly kill most small mammals. Pikas live in talus slopes, areas of broken rock and boulders, usually at elevations above 2,500 meters. The spaces between and under the rocks provide shelter from weather and predators, and pikas create networks of runways through these rocky labyrinths, memorizing the routes and becoming extremely quick at navigating them. This three-dimensional maze of rock is their fortress, and they know every entrance, every passage, every hiding spot. Unlike many mountain animals, pikas do not hibernate. They remain active year-round, even during the coldest winter months, when temperatures plunge far below freezing and snow blankets the landscape. Staying active in winter requires energy, which requires food, and this is where one of the pikas' most remarkable behaviors comes in: haying. During the summer growing season, pikas work tirelessly, cutting grasses, herbs, and wildflowers, and carrying them to caches among the rocks. But rather than eating this food immediately or storing it fresh, pikas lay it out in the sun. They spread vegetation on flat rocks, allowing it to dry in the mountain sun and wind, creating what is essentially hay. Dried plant material has several advantages over fresh. It weighs less for the same nutritional value, it doesn't rot, and it can be stored long-term without spoiling. A single pika may create multiple hay piles, each the size of a bushel basket or larger, containing several kilograms of dried vegetation. These stores must last through a winter that can span 6 to 8 months, during which fresh vegetation is buried under deep snow and unavailable. The pika visits its caches throughout the winter, feeding from the stored hay to maintain its energy levels. The work of haying is prodigious. Researchers studying pikas have documented that a single individual may make over 100 foraging trips per day during peak haying season, each trip involving cutting vegetation, carrying it back to the cache site, and arranging it for drying. It's relentless labor, but the alternative is starvation during winter. Pikas also cache dried vegetation in the spaces beneath rocks, creating sheltered storage areas that are protected from wind and weather. They defend these caches aggressively from other pikas, as theft of cached food is essentially theft of survival. A pika that loses its hay stores faces grim prospects for surviving the winter. Temperature tolerance is another remarkable aspect of pika physiology. Despite their fluffy appearance, pikas are not particularly cold tolerant by high altitude standards. Their comfort zone is surprisingly narrow, with temperatures between about 5 and 20 degrees Celsius being optimal. Above about 25 degrees, pikas can actually overheat, and exposure to temperatures of 30 degrees or higher can be fatal. This seems paradoxical for an animal living in the mountains, where summer temperatures can exceed 30 degrees in the sun. But pikas deal with this through behavior and microhabitat selection. They forage during the cooler parts of the day, early morning and late evening, and retreat into the cool spaces under the rocks during the heat of the day. The rock interstices remain relatively cool even when surface temperatures soar, because the rocks provide shade, and the spaces are often ventilated by air movement through the talus field. This temperature sensitivity makes pikas vulnerable to climate change. As mountain temperatures rise, pikas must either move to higher elevations, where it's cooler, or risk overheating. But there's only so much mountain above them, and eventually they run out of upward to go. In some mountain ranges, particularly in the Great Basin of North America, pika populations have already been extirpated from lower elevation sites, and the remaining populations are restricted to the highest peaks, islands of suitable habitat in an increasingly warm sea. Communication among pikas is vocal. They produce loud, sharp calls that echo among the rocks, warnings to others that a predator is near, or assertions of territorial boundaries. Each pika has a distinct call, recognizable to neighbors, and the calling behavior serves to space individuals out across the habitat, reducing direct competition for resources. Marmots, by contrast to the tiny pikas, are large rodents, the heaviest members of the squirrel family. The alpine marmot of Europe can weigh up to 8 kilograms in autumn, just before hibernation, making it a substantial creature for a rodent. The hoary marmot of North America can be similarly large. These are animals built like furry footballs, with short legs, rounded bodies, and bushy tails. Marmots live in burrows that they excavate in alpine meadows, areas of relatively flat ground with deep soil where burrowing is possible. These burrows can be quite elaborate, with multiple entrances, extensive tunnel systems, and specialized chambers for different functions: sleeping, raising young, and food storage. Some burrow systems are used by multiple generations, expanded and improved over decades, becoming complex underground architecture. The primary survival strategy for marmots is hibernation. As autumn approaches and temperatures drop, marmots retreat to their burrows, seal the entrances with soil and vegetation, and enter a state of deep torpor that will last up to 9 months in some species. During hibernation, metabolic rate drops to less than 5% of normal. Body temperature falls to just a few degrees above ambient. Heart rate slows from perhaps 100 beats per minute to as few as 5, and breathing becomes infrequent and shallow. This profound reduction in physiological activity saves enormous amounts of energy. The marmot survives the winter by slowly metabolizing its fat reserves, burning just enough calories to keep basic cellular functions going. The colony, for marmots often hibernate together in family groups, huddles in a tight ball, further reducing heat loss through shared body warmth. Emerging from hibernation in spring is a gradual process. The marmots must rewarm their bodies, reactivate their metabolic systems, and resume normal activity. They emerge thin, having lost perhaps half their pre-hibernation body weight, and desperately hungry. The first weeks after emergence are critical, as the marmots must find enough food to rebuild their strength before the breeding season begins. Social behavior in marmots is complex. Alpine marmots live in family groups consisting of a breeding pair and their offspring from multiple years. The group defends a territory and cooperates in various ways. Young from previous years help their parents raise new litters, an example of cooperative breeding, relatively rare among mammals. Grooming, play, and vocal communication are frequent, and the bonds between family members appear to be strong. Marmots communicate with a variety of vocalizations, including the famous marmot whistle, a loud, high-pitched alarm call that carries across considerable distances. When a marmot spots a predator, an eagle, a fox, a bear, it gives the alarm call, and all marmots within earshot immediately bolt for their burrows. The sentinel system, where one individual watches for danger while others feed, provides early warning and significantly reduces predation risk for the colony. Predation is indeed a major source of mortality for marmots. Eagles are perhaps the most dangerous predators, capable of swooping down and snatching marmots in the open. Foxes, wolves, bears, and badgers also prey on marmots, sometimes digging out burrows to reach the occupants. Marmots have few defenses other than vigilance and retreat. They cannot outrun most predators, so early detection and quick access to burrow entrances are their main survival strategies. Reproduction in marmots occurs once per year. After hibernation ends, breeding takes place, and following a gestation period of about 33 days, the female gives birth to a litter of typically 3 to 5 pups. The pups are born hairless and blind, developing slowly over the following weeks in the safety of the burrow. By midsummer, the young are venturing out and learning to forage, but they remain with the family group, often for 2 years or more, before dispersing to establish their own territories. The feeding strategy of marmots during the brief summer is simple. Eat as much as possible. Marmots are herbivores, feeding on grasses, herbs, and flowers, and they consume enormous quantities of vegetation during the growing season. An adult marmot may eat up to 0.5 kilogram of plant material per day, rapidly building up the fat reserves that will sustain it through the long hibernation. Body size matters for hibernation physiology. Larger animals have a lower surface area to volume ratio than smaller animals, meaning they lose heat more slowly. This is advantageous during hibernation, as it reduces the metabolic cost of maintaining even the reduced body temperature of torpor. This is part of the reason why marmots can be such large rodents. Larger body size is actually beneficial for the hibernation lifestyle. Both pikas and marmots play important ecological roles in mountain ecosystems. Marmots, through their burrowing, aerate soil and mix nutrients, affecting plant growth patterns. Their burrows also provide shelter for other species. When a marmot burrow is abandoned, it may be taken over by other animals seeking refuge from weather or predators. Pikas influence vegetation patterns through their selective haying. They preferentially cut certain plant species over others, effectively gardening their territories. This selective herbivory can affect plant community composition, favoring or disfavoring particular species based on pika preferences. Climate change poses serious threats to both groups. Pikas are already experiencing range contractions in many areas, unable to cope with rising temperatures. Marmots may face changes in snow, cover that affect hibernation, if winters become shorter, but snowpack decreases, leaving marmots exposed to cold without insulating snow cover or forcing them to hibernate during periods when they could be feeding. Conservation of these small mountain specialists requires preserving not just individual mountains, but the connectivity between mountain ranges. Many mountain ecosystems are becoming increasingly isolated as lowland development expands, creating sky islands where populations are trapped with no way to disperse to other suitable habitats. For species already constrained by temperature to the highest elevations, this isolation could prove devastating as climates continue to change. Yet for now, on clear summer mornings in the mountains, the whistle of marmots still echoes across alpine meadows, and the sharp calls of pikas still ring among the tallest slopes. These small creatures, so well adapted to their harsh environment, continue to thrive in the realm between the tree line and the permanent snow, testament to the power of evolution to craft solutions to even the most extreme challenges. On the vast Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, across ranges averaging 4,000 to 5,000 meters above sea level, lives an animal that has shaped human civilization in one of Earth's most inhospitable regions. The yak, Bos gruniens, is not just adapted to high altitude. It is the definitive high-altitude large mammal, the only bovine that can live, work, and reproduce comfortably at elevations where cattle struggle and die. The yak is an imposing animal. Bulls can weigh up to 1,000 kilograms, while cows typically weigh around 300 kilograms. They stand about 2 meters tall at the shoulder, with a massive, humped body covered in long, shaggy hair that can hang down nearly to the ground. The hair coat is one of the yak's most obvious adaptations, a 3-layered system providing insulation that allows the animal to withstand temperatures far below zero. The outer layer consists of coarse guard hairs, sometimes exceeding 60 centimeters in length, that shed rain and snow. Beneath this is a layer of intermediate fibers, and closest to the skin is a fine, dense undercoat of wool that traps air and provides the core insulation. This triple-layer system is so effective that yaks can comfortably graze in blizzards. Their metabolic heat production combined with their insulation, keeping them warm even in the most bitter conditions. Yaks have short legs relative to their body size, which reduces the surface area exposed to cold and lowers their center of gravity, improving stability on steep, uneven terrain. The hooves are large and rounded with hard edges, providing good grip on rock and ice. Yaks are surprisingly agile for such large animals, capable of traversing mountain passes and steep slopes that would be impassable for domestic cattle. But the yak's most remarkable adaptations are invisible, changes to the blood, the heart, the lungs, and the cellular metabolism that allow it to function efficiently in the oxygen-depleted air of the plateau. These adaptations are the product of millions of years of evolution, fine-tuned through natural selection, acting on wild yak populations, and retained in the domestic yaks that are now the primary large livestock of the Tibetan Plateau. The yak's blood has a higher concentration of hemoglobin than that of cattle, and that hemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen. Studies comparing yaks at different elevations show that yaks at 5,000 meters have red blood cell counts significantly higher than yaks at lower elevations, and dramatically higher than cattle at any altitude. This increased oxygen carrying capacity compensates for the reduced oxygen availability in each breath, but simply packing more red blood cells into the blood creates problems. The blood becomes more viscous, thicker, which makes it harder for the heart to pump and increases the risk of clotting. Yaks have evolved several mechanisms to counteract this. Their blood vessels, particularly the pulmonary arteries that carry blood to the lungs are wider than those of cattle, reducing resistance to blood flow. The heart itself is larger and more muscular, capable of generating the force needed to pump thicker blood through the circulatory system. Perhaps most remarkably, yaks show almost no pulmonary vasoconstriction in response to hypoxia. In cattle and most other mammals, low oxygen levels trigger a narrowing of blood vessels in the lungs, a response that paradoxically makes the oxygen shortage worse by reducing blood flow through the lungs. This response evolved as a way to redirect blood flow away from poorly ventilated areas of the lung. But at high altitude, where oxygen is uniformly low everywhere, the response becomes maladaptive, leading to pulmonary hypertension and potentially to dangerous fluid buildup in the lungs. Yaks have essentially turned off this response. Their pulmonary blood vessels remain open even in severe hypoxia, allowing blood to flow freely and maximizing the opportunity for oxygen exchange. This is one of the key differences between yaks and cattle at high altitude. Where cattle develop severe pulmonary problems, yaks maintain normal lung function. The lungs themselves are proportionally larger in yaks than in cattle, providing more surface area for gas exchange. The chest cavity is deep and wide, accommodating these large lungs and allowing for the substantial air volumes that must be processed to extract sufficient oxygen from thin air. Metabolic adaptations also play a role. Yaks have lower overall metabolic rates than cattle, meaning they require less oxygen and less food to maintain basic physiological functions. This reduced metabolism is an adaptation to both the low oxygen environment and the scarcity of high-quality forage on the plateau. During the long plateau winter, when snow covers the ground and plants stop growing, yaks can survive on poor quality roughage that would not sustain cattle, maintaining their body condition through efficient digestion and minimal energy waste. The yak's digestive system, like that of all bovines, is built around the rumen, a specialized stomach chamber that houses microorganisms capable of breaking down cellulose, the structural component of plant cell walls that most animals cannot digest. The yak's rumen microbiome is particularly efficient, extracting maximum nutritional value from the tough, fibrous plants that dominate the high plateau. Fermentation in the rumen produces volatile fatty acids, which the yak absorbs and uses as its primary energy source. This system provides 60 to 75% of the yak's metabolic energy, making it remarkably efficient at extracting value from low-quality forage. Temperature regulation is another challenge for large mammals at high altitude. The combination of extreme cold, high winds, and intense solar radiation creates a complex thermal environment. Yaks deal with this through their insulating coat, through behavioral adaptations like seeking shelter during the worst weather, and through physiological mechanisms that allow them to conserve heat when necessary and dissipate it when they become too warm. Paradoxically, overheating can be a problem for yaks. The thick insulation that keeps them warm at -40 degrees can cause them to overheat if they exert themselves vigorously on a sunny day. Yaks regulate their activity levels, feeding during cooler parts of the day and resting during peak heat. They may also seek out snow to lie on, using the cold snow to cool their bodies through conduction. Wild yaks, the ancestors of domestic yaks, still exist in small numbers in the most remote parts of the Tibetan Plateau and surrounding mountain ranges. These wild populations are shy and difficult to study, inhabiting areas so isolated that humans rarely venture there. Wild yaks are larger than their domestic descendants, with bulls sometimes exceeding 2 meters at the shoulder and weighing 1,200 kilograms or more. They are also darker in color, typically blackish-brown compared to the varied colors of domestic yaks. Domestic yaks are central to human life on the Tibetan Plateau and have been for thousands of years. They provide transportation, able to carry loads across high mountain passes where other pack animals would fail. They provide milk, rich in fat and protein, which is made into butter, cheese, and yogurt, staples of the Tibetan diet. They provide meat, a crucial source of protein in a region where agriculture is limited. Their hair and wool are used for clothing and for weaving into tent fabric. Their hides provide leather for shoes and bags, and their dung, perhaps surprisingly, is one of their most valuable products, serving as the primary fuel in a region with few trees. Dried yak dung burns slowly and provides heat for cooking and warmth. Yaks are also crossbred with cattle to produce hybrids that combine some of the yak's high altitude tolerance with the cattle's higher milk or meat production. These hybrids, called Dzo when male and Dzomo when female, are fertile in the female line, allowing for complex breeding strategies that humans have employed for centuries to create animals suited to specific altitudes and purposes. The cultural significance of yaks extends beyond their practical utility. In Tibetan culture, yaks are revered animals, often appearing in art, folklore, and religious ceremonies. White yaks, which occur rarely, are considered especially sacred. The yak is a symbol of Tibet itself, representing the harsh beauty of the plateau and the resilience of the people who live there. Modern research into yak genomics has revealed the genetic basis of many high-altitude adaptations. Specific genes related to hypoxia response, energy metabolism, and DNA repair show signs of positive selection in yak populations, meaning these genes have been favored by evolution because they enhance survival at high altitude. Some of these genetic variants are now being studied for their potential relevance to human medicine, particularly for understanding and treating hypoxia-related conditions like pulmonary hypertension or chronic mountain sickness. The future of yaks is tied to the future of the Tibetan Plateau and the people who live there. Climate change is affecting the plateau, altering precipitation patterns, affecting grassland productivity, and changing the distribution of parasites and diseases. Economic changes are also reshaping herding practices, with some young people leaving traditional nomadic lifestyles for urban employment, potentially reducing the number of people available to tend yak herds. Conservation of wild yaks is a priority in China, where most of the remaining population lives. Protected areas have been established, and hunting restrictions are in place, though enforcement in remote areas remains challenging. Wild yak populations are estimated at only a few thousand individuals, far fewer than the millions of domestic yaks, making the wild form vulnerable to extinction. Yet the yak endures, as it has for millennia, a living symbol of adaptation to extreme conditions. On the windswept plateaus, as winter storms sweep across the grasslands, yaks stand facing into the wind, their long hair streaming, their bodies seemingly indifferent to conditions that would kill most mammals within hours. They are proof that given enough time, given enough generations for natural selection to work, life can find ways to thrive even in the harshest places Earth has to offer. While mammals must contend with gravity every moment they traverse mountain terrain, Birds possess the gift of flight, able to soar above peaks and valleys, to cross ranges in hours that would take a walking animal days. Yet flight at high altitude brings its own challenges. The thin air that makes breathing difficult also makes flying difficult, providing less lift to support a bird's weight and less oxygen to power the flight muscles, which are among the most metabolically demanding tissues in any animal. To fly at extreme altitude requires adaptations as profound as any we've discussed, and nowhere are these adaptations more spectacularly displayed than in two birds, the bar-headed goose of Asia and the Andean condor of South America. The bar-headed goose, Ansa indicus, undertakes one of the most remarkable migrations in the animal kingdom. Breeding in the lakes and wetlands of the Tibetan Plateau and Mongolia, these geese spend their summers at elevations between 3,000 and 5,000 meters. But when winter approaches and the high-altitude lakes freeze, the geese must migrate to warmer wintering grounds in lowland India. To reach India, they must cross the Himalayas. The Himalayas are the tallest mountain range on Earth, with numerous peaks exceeding 8,000 meters, including Mount Everest at 8,848 meters. While bar-headed geese don't typically fly over the highest summits, they do routinely cross high passes, and they have been documented flying at altitudes exceeding 7,000 meters. There are anecdotal reports, though unconfirmed, of geese being seen or heard near the summit of Mount Everest, which, if true, would make them among the highest flying birds ever recorded. At 7,000 meters, the air pressure is less than half what it is at sea level, and the oxygen available in each breath is similarly reduced. Yet the bar-headed goose is flapping, not gliding. Flapping flight is the most energetically expensive form of locomotion known in vertebrates, requiring enormous amounts of oxygen to fuel the contracting flight muscles. How do these geese sustain such activity in air so thin that human mountaineers require bottled oxygen? The answer lies in a suite of integrated physiological adaptations spanning the entire oxygen transport cascade, from the lungs to the mitochondria in the muscle cells. Bar-headed geese have larger lungs than most waterfowl of comparable size, providing more surface area for gas exchange. They can hyperventilate at rates up to 7 times their normal resting rate when in hypoxia, increasing the volume of air moving through their respiratory system. Their hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein in their blood, has a higher oxygen affinity than that of other geese, the result of specific amino acid substitutions that alter how the hemoglobin molecule binds oxygen. This means that even in thin air, bar-headed goose hemoglobin effectively captures what little oxygen is available. The heart is proportionally large and can achieve cardiac outputs 5 times the resting rate when needed, pumping enormous volumes of blood to the flight muscles. The flight muscles themselves are dense with capillaries, tiny blood vessels that bring blood into close contact with muscle cells, facilitating oxygen diffusion. The mitochondria in these muscle cells, the organelles where oxygen is used to produce ATP, the cell's energy currency, are numerous and highly efficient. Remarkably, recent research suggests that bar-headed geese may also reduce their overall metabolic rate during high-altitude flight, essentially doing more with less. By flying more efficiently, perhaps by optimizing their wing beats and reducing unnecessary muscular activity, they can sustain flight while consuming less oxygen than would be predicted based on the energy output of flight. The geese also show sophisticated behavioral adaptations to the challenge of high-altitude flight. They typically migrate at night, when air is denser and cooler. The cooler temperatures reduce the risk of overheating, which is a concern because the flight muscles generate enormous heat, and the colder air is slightly denser, providing marginally more oxygen per breath. The timing takes advantage of stable atmospheric conditions, avoiding the turbulent daytime winds that blast across the peaks. Interestingly, tracked bar-headed geese don't actually fly directly over the highest peaks. Instead, they route through valleys and passes, using the topography to find the lowest pathways through the range. 95% of their time during migration is spent below about 5,800 meters. The extremely high altitude flights, the ones at 7,000 meters or above, are relatively rare and brief. This suggests that while the geese are capable of very high altitude flight, they avoid it when possible, presumably because it's extremely demanding. Wind patterns also factor into their migration strategy. Rather than taking advantage of tailwinds that could speed their journey, bar-headed geese wait for calm conditions before attempting the crossing. Perhaps because turbulent winds make navigation and flight control more difficult in already challenging conditions. They appear to prioritize safety over speed. The bar-headed goose is a medium-sized goose, weighing about 2 to 3 kilograms, with a wingspan of about 140 to 160 centimeters. It's not an exceptionally large or powerful bird compared to other waterfowl. What sets it apart is not physical size, but physiological specialization, the result of evolutionary adaptation to a migratory route that has crossed the Himalayas for thousands of years. On the opposite side of the world, in the Andes Mountains of South America, soars a different aerial marvel, the Andean condor, Vultur gryphus. This is a giant among birds, one of the largest flying birds in the world. An adult male Andean condor can weigh up to 15 kilograms with a wingspan that can exceed 3 meters. These are not birds that can hover or dart. They are built for soaring, for riding air currents with minimal effort, masters of the wind. The Andean condor's range extends along the entire length of the Andes, from Venezuela and Colombia in the north to Tierra del Fuego at the southern tip of South America. They inhabit both the high peaks and the adjacent coastlines, wherever they can find the strong winds and thermal updrafts they need for soaring, and wherever there are carcasses to feed on, for condors are obligate scavengers, eating only carrion. At high altitude, the condor uses the mountain topography to its advantage. Ridges and cliffs create updrafts as wind strikes the mountains and is deflected upward. By positioning themselves in these updrafts, condors can gain altitude with little effort, riding the rising air like an elevator. Once aloft, they can glide for enormous distances, scanning the landscape below for signs of food. Remarkably, research using GPS trackers and accelerometers has shown that Andean condors flap their wings as little as 1% of the time during flight. A condor can remain airborne for more than 5 hours without a single wing flap, covering over 170 kilometers in that time. Most of the flapping occurs during takeoff. Once airborne, the condor relies almost entirely on gliding and soaring. This minimal flapping strategy is an adaptation to the bird's large size. For a very large bird, flapping flight is extremely energetically expensive. The flight muscles would need to be enormous to generate enough power for sustained flapping, which would make the bird even heavier. which would require even more muscle in a runaway spiral. Instead, the condor has evolved to minimize flapping, to use the natural motion of the air to stay aloft. The wing structure is crucial. The wingspan is extremely long, giving the wings a high aspect ratio, the length being much greater than the width. This shape is aerodynamically efficient for gliding, reducing drag, and allowing the condor to maintain altitude while losing speed very slowly. The primary feathers at the wingtips are long and separated, forming what look like fingers. These individual feathers can be adjusted independently, allowing the condor to make fine corrections to its flight path and to extract maximum lift from every subtle movement of air. Takeoff is the most challenging moment. The condor is so heavy that it cannot easily launch from flat ground. Instead, condors prefer to roost on high cliffs or rocky outcrops, places where they can simply step off into space and drop, gaining speed as they fall until their wings generate enough lift to support their weight. Watching a condor take off from a high cliff is to witness a controlled fall transition into majestic flight. The bird dropping like a stone for a few heart-stopping seconds before its wings catch the air and it pulls up, transforming descent into soaring. The head and neck of the condor are largely featherless, an adaptation shared with all vultures. When a condor feeds on a carcass, plunging its head deep into the body cavity to reach internal organs, feathers would become fouled with blood and decomposing tissue. A bare head is easier to keep clean, can be sanitized by exposure to sun and wind, and may also provide some thermal regulation, as excess heat can be lost from the bare skin when the bird is active or in warm conditions. Andean condors have exceptional vision, among the best in the bird world. They soar at great heights, sometimes over 6,000 meters, scanning vast areas of terrain for carcasses. They watch the behavior of other scavengers, noting where ravens or smaller vultures are gathering, which might indicate a food source. Once a carcass is located, condors descend, spiraling down in great circles, losing altitude gradually until they can land near the food. A single carcass might attract multiple condors along with other scavengers. Condors are dominant, able to drive off smaller birds, and they feed aggressively once they begin, tearing meat with their powerful hooked beaks. A condor can consume several kilograms of meat in one feeding session, storing it in a crop, an expandable pouch in the throat, which distends visibly when full. After gorging, the condor may be too heavy to fly easily and must rest, digesting its meal before it can take to the air again. Breeding in condors is a slow process. They don't reach sexual maturity until about 6 years of age, and pairs mate for life. They nest on inaccessible cliff ledges, laying a single egg every 2 years. Both parents incubate the egg for about 60 days, and once hatched, the chick requires parental care for more than a year before it fledges, and even longer before it becomes truly independent. This slow reproductive rate means that condor populations cannot recover quickly from declines. Andean condors face threats throughout their range. They are sometimes poisoned by ranchers who place toxins in carcasses to kill pumas or foxes, and condors feeding on those carcasses are also killed. They are shot, sometimes for sport or because of unfounded beliefs that they attack livestock. Habitat loss and reduction in wild prey populations, which provide natural carcasses, also impact condor populations. The species is listed as vulnerable, and conservation efforts are ongoing in several countries. In flight, however, the condor is supreme, a master of its element. To watch a condor soar along a mountain ridge, wings barely moving, riding the wind with consummate skill, is to witness one of nature's most perfectly adapted creatures. In the thin air of the high Andes, where oxygen is scarce and winds are fierce, the condor has found not just survival, but a domain where it reigns unmatched. Other mountain birds have their own remarkable adaptations. Wall creepers, small passerines, forage on vertical cliff faces in the Alps and other Eurasian ranges, flitting along sheer walls like feathered butterflies. Ptarmigans change colour seasonally and have feathered feet for insulation. Alpine choughs, corvids related to crows, live year-round at extreme altitudes in the Himalayas, feeding on scraps left by mountaineers and whatever insects they can find. Golden eagles hunt marmots and hares in mountain terrain, using their superior vision and aerial agility to strike from above. Lammergeiers, or bearded vultures, drop bones from height to break them open on rocks, then feed on the marrow inside, a specialized feeding strategy that requires both the cognitive ability to understand the technique and the aerial skill to carry heavy bones to sufficient height. Each mountain bird, from the smallest alpine swift to the giant condors, contributes to the complex ecology of the peaks. They are pollinators, seed dispersers, predators, scavengers, each playing roles that connect the mountain ecosystems to the lowlands and to each other. And they remind us that the sky above the mountains is not empty space, but a realm filled with life, with creatures that have conquered the challenges of flight at altitude as surely as the terrestrial animals have conquered the challenges of walking, climbing, and surviving on the ground below. As our journey through the high peaks comes to a close, we find ourselves looking back across the terrain we've travelled, mentally retracing our path from the windswept plateaus to the vertical cliffs, from the alpine meadows to the frozen ridges. The animals we've encountered tonight, the ibex scaling impossible walls, the snow leopard stalking through stone mazes, the pikas hoarding their hay, the yaks standing stolid in blizzards, the geese flying higher than mountains, the condors soaring on motionless wings. Each represents a solution to the puzzle of survival in one of Earth's most demanding environments. What binds these species together is adaptation, that fundamental biological process where populations change over generations, shaped by the relentless pressure of natural selection. The high mountains have posed challenges that are physiological, animals needing more efficient blood, stronger hearts, better oxygen transport. They are morphological, requiring thicker fur, specialized hooves, larger wings. They are behavioral, demanding food storage, seasonal migration, the knowledge of safe routes and sheltered spots. No single adaptation suffices. Survival at altitude requires integration, multiple systems working in concert, each supporting the others. The yak's hemoglobin with high oxygen affinity works because the yak also has more red blood cells, larger lungs, a stronger heart, and blood vessels that resist vasoconstriction. Remove any one component, and the system fails. This integration means that evolution to high-altitude conditions is not simple or quick. It requires many genetic changes, accumulating over thousands of generations, with each change tested against the unforgiving reality of mountain life. Those individuals that possessed slightly better adaptations had slightly higher survival, left slightly more offspring, and those offspring carried the beneficial genetic variants forward. Repeated across millennia, This process has sculpted the mountain wildlife we see today. Yet, adaptation has limits. These animals are specialists, supremely well suited to their particular environments, but often unable to thrive elsewhere. A snow leopard cannot survive in a lowland jungle. A yak cannot live at sea level for extended periods without problems. Specialization is both strength and vulnerability. Today, mountain environments face rapid changes. Climate warming is occurring faster at high altitudes than in many lowland areas, a phenomenon called elevation-dependent warming. Snow cover is decreasing, glaciers are retreating, and vegetation zones are shifting upward. For animals already living near the highest habitable elevations, there is literally no higher ground to retreat to as temperatures rise. Some species may adapt through microevolution, genetic changes occurring fast enough to track environmental shifts. Others may expand their behavioral repertoires, finding new ways to cope. But adaptation takes time, and the pace of current climate change is faster than anything these populations have experienced in recent evolutionary history. There is real risk that some mountain specialists will be unable to adapt quickly enough, that populations will decline, that local extinctions will occur. Conservation of mountain wildlife requires understanding not just individual species, but the ecosystems they inhabit and the connections between different mountain ranges. It requires protecting habitat, reducing human-wildlife conflict, managing livestock grazing, controlling poaching, and mitigating climate change. It also requires something harder to quantify: cultural shifts, changes in how humans view wildlife, recognition that these animals have intrinsic value beyond any economic use they might have. The indigenous peoples who have shared the mountains with these animals for millennia often have deep cultural connections to wildlife, viewing animals like yaks, snow leopards, and condors as part of their identity, their landscape, their spiritual world. Conservation efforts that engage these communities, that incorporate traditional knowledge and support local livelihoods, tend to be more effective and sustainable than top-down approaches that ignore the people who actually live in wildlife habitat. Scientific research continues to reveal new insights about mountain wildlife. Advances in genomics are identifying the specific genes responsible for high-altitude adaptations. GPS tracking and camera traps are providing detailed data on animal movements and behavior. Long-term studies are documenting population trends and ecological relationships. Each new finding adds to our understanding and improves our ability to protect these remarkable creatures. Yet, for all we've learned, mountains remain in many ways mysterious, their wildlife still elusive. Many mountain ranges are so remote, so difficult to access, that comprehensive wildlife surveys have never been conducted. New species are still being discovered, and the ecology of many known species remains poorly understood. There is still so much to learn. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, perhaps you can imagine yourself on a high mountain ridge. The air is thin and cold, the wind constant, the view stretching to distant horizons. Below you, the valleys are in shadow, but up here, the setting sun still paints the peaks in gold and rose. A pika calls from the rocks nearby, its sharp voice echoing. Somewhere on a distant cliff, a snow leopard begins its evening hunt, moving like smoke over stone. Far above, almost invisible against the darkening sky, a bar-headed goose wings its way over the pass, heading toward winter grounds. And across the valley, an ibex stands outlined against the sky, master of the vertical world, perfectly balanced on an edge too narrow for human comprehension. These creatures, shaped by the mountains, masters of altitude, continue their ancient rhythms, carrying forward the legacy of countless generations, embodying the persistence and creativity of life. They remind us that adaptation is possible, that life finds ways even in the most extreme conditions, that the world still holds wild places where animals live according to their own rules, beyond human control. The mountains will outlast us. The animals, if we give them the chance, will continue their existence long after our brief moment in Earth's history has passed. They deserve that chance. They deserve our respect, our protection, our willingness to share the planet with them. And with that thought, our journey through the high peaks ends. The mountains remain, the animals continue their lives, and we, from the comfort of the lowlands, can only marvel at what life has achieved in the realm where earth meets sky. If these explorations of the natural world have brought you calm or sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing to Bedtime Biology. And if you'd like to share your thoughts, the comments are always open. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams carry you to high places.